My name is Emma Carter. I'm 28, and last Christmas Eve, while snowflakes sparkled against the tall arched windows of my childhood home, my father grabbed me by the arm, shoved me toward the front door, and yelled, "Get out!" I held my daughter Lily tighter, her little red boots slipping on the polished marble floor. But the worst part wasn't the public humiliation. It was how Linda, my stepmother, just stood there with her champagne glass half raised, a thin smile playing at her lips. And Jake, my younger brother, chuckled into his whiskey like it was all one big joke. If you've ever felt invisible at home, or if this story hits close to your heart, please tap like. It lets me know I'm not alone out here. What they didn't know was, I wasn't just the shameful single mom they loved to whisper about behind closed doors. Inside my purse, tucked beside Lily's mittens, was the master key to everything they valued. And soon, I'd use it to freeze every cent they ever stole from me. But in that moment, standing in the Carter family's living room while guests awkwardly averted their eyes, I didn't feel powerful. I felt 14 again, small, stupid, and alone. How did I go from building a tech empire that could have lifted all of us to being shoved out of my own family's Christmas like a stray dog? It started with a sound, not a loud one, just the soft clink of a spoon against porcelain, the clatter of silverware and whispered gossip floating through the air. The chandelier above the dining table cast warm gold light across the crystal glasses, the roast ham, the embroidered napkins Linda insisted on using only for real guests. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I carried Lily's plate. No meat, no dairy, just steamed rice and cucumbers. She had allergies. No one remembered. Linda watched me over the rim of her wineglass. "Still doing that plant-based thing with her?" she said, not even looking at Lily, who was too busy tracing the snowflake pattern on the glass window. I didn't answer, just set the plate down and sat beside my daughter, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. Dad cleared his throat. "So, Emma," he began, "how's that—" "What is it again? Your little computer project?" My stomach turned, the same way it always did when he played dumb about what I did. "It's going well," I said. "We just crossed 87 million in valuation this quarter." The silence hit hard. Jake coughed into his napkin. Linda's fork paused mid-air. Dad leaned back, slow, like he was trying to digest the number. 87 million, he repeated, then barked out a laugh. "Well, damn. Guess those nerdy college days paid off." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You serious? That's more than Dad's company ever made." Linda's smile turned brittle. "It's not polite to talk money at the table, dear." "Funny," I said, my voice quieter now. "That's all you talked about when I dropped out to start my first app." Dad's fist hit the table, not hard, but enough to make the glasses tremble. "Don't get smart with us, Emma." Lily flinched. I placed a hand on her back. "She's just stating a fact," Jake muttered, but his smirk said otherwise. "Can't handle a woman doing better than you?" Dad shot him a look. "Don't you start." The room felt tighter, like the garland-wrapped banisters were closing in. The scent of pine and cinnamon candles turned sour in my nose. "You're a guest here," Linda said, suddenly sharp. I blinked. "Guest? This is my house, too." "Not anymore," Dad growled. "You left. You shamed this family, had a kid out of wedlock, and now you think you can waltz in here like nothing happened?" "Dad," I whispered. He stood. "You show up here uninvited after years of silence and start throwing numbers around like some Wall Street shark. We don't need your money. We need our dignity." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about shame. It was about control. About a man who couldn't stand the idea that his daughter, was wealthier, more successful, more powerful, without ever needing him. And that terrified him. "I came to share Christmas with my family," I said. "That's all." "You came to gloat," he snapped, "to rub your perfect life in our faces." Lily tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, can we go?" Before I could answer, he stepped toward me. "Get out." His voice was low, final, the kind of tone he used when I was 16 and dared to cut my hair short. I swallowed hard, looked around the room. No one said a word, not even Jake, not even Linda. I bent down, zipped up Lily's coat with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. My heartbeat roared in my ears like it wanted to drown everything else out. I stood up. "Fine, I said. The cold hit us the moment the door shut behind us. Snow was falling now, soft and slow. The driveway was empty except for a string of lights flickering over the garage. I buckled Lily into the back seat, her eyes round and confused. "Why was Grandpa mad?" she asked. I didn't answer, just kissed her forehead and shut the door. As I pulled out of the driveway, I couldn't bring myself to look back. Until at the last second, I did. Someone was at the upstairs window, watching. Still. Just a trick of the light? Or had someone in that house not turned away? Even now, I don't know why that gaze chills me more than the snow ever did. The nursing home smelled like old soup and pine-scented disinfectant. Not the good kind of pine, more like someone sprayed over something rotting. I stepped inside, holding Lily's tiny hand. Her mitten slipped from my grip as she raced ahead, her boots squeaking against the dull linoleum floor. "Mommy, is this a hospital?" she asked, peeking into the dim hallway lined with peeling wallpaper and fake poinsettia garlands. "Sort of," I said, my voice catching. I hadn't been here in months. A nurse at the front desk glanced up, her face sagging with end-of-shift exhaustion. "You visiting Ellen Carter?" I nodded. She hesitated. "She hasn't had any visitors all month. She might not recognize you right away." That hit harder than I expected. I swallowed and nodded again, brushing snow from my coat sleeve. "Thanks." The hallway stretched on like a bad memory. Each room looked the same, dimly lit, a single window crusted with condensation, the faint hum of machines, and the soft wheeze of forgotten lives. I found Grandma's room at the end, past the flickering exit sign. She was smaller than I remembered, curled into herself like a question mark, her frame lost in a patchwork quilt. Her white hair was thinner now, floating like spider silk against the pillow. Eyes closed, lips parted slightly. I took a breath. My throat burned. "Grandma?" She didn't stir. Lily tiptoed beside the bed, frowning. "Why is she sleeping so much?" I didn't have an answer, just took the chair by the window, the seat cold and stiff beneath me. Outside, gray snow drifted sideways in the wind, the trees brittle and bare like bones. A stack of unopened Christmas cards sat on her bedside table, dusty and forgotten. I picked one up. My own handwriting stared back at me. I'd sent it 2 weeks ago. She never opened it. I scanned the rest, store-bought cards, most with glitter or smiling snowmen, all sealed, none signed by Jake, none from Linda, and definitely nothing from Dad. "She likes when people visit, right?" Lily asked, her voice small. "She used to." The nurse peeked in again. "Sorry to interrupt," she whispered, "but are you family?" "Her granddaughter." She hesitated. "No one's been here. Not for birthdays, not Thanksgiving. I thought she didn't have anyone left." My chest tightened. "They've just been busy." A lie so brittle it snapped as soon as it left my mouth. She gave me a sad smile and left. I reached for Grandma's hand. Cold, wrinkled, papery soft. I remembered when those fingers used to braid my hair, when I'd sit on her lap and she'd hum some old folk tune I never learned the name of, back before things got complicated. I blinked, trying to chase away the sting behind my eyes. "Grandma," I whispered, "I'm sorry." Still no movement. Lily climbed into my lap, leaning her head against my chest. "She's not gonna die, right?" "She's strong," I said. "Always has been." But even I didn't believe it. I reached for her pillow, trying to fluff it gently. That's when I felt something. Paper, tucked beneath the fabric. I pulled it out slowly. A crumpled scrap, edges torn, the ink smudged like it had been gripped tight in a shaking hand. 4 words. "They'll pay for this." No name, no signature, just those words, scribbled in sharp, uneven strokes. My heart thudded. What did she mean? Who wrote it? My gaze darted to her face, still unmoving. Had she written this in some lucid moment? Or had someone else? A million questions swarmed my head. Was she scared? Angry? Was this a warning? I folded the note, slipping it into my coat pocket. Back in the corner of the room, a single Christmas light blinked on a dying tree. Red, then green, then nothing. The rhythm uneven, almost mocking. "I'll be back soon," I whispered. Still, she didn't move. As we walked out, I couldn't help glancing back one last time. She looked like a shadow of herself, like the years had peeled her down to her bones and no one had noticed or cared. In the car, I kept the heat low, my fingers tapping the steering wheel while Lily hummed to herself in the back seat. My mind was still in that room, still gripping that note. What if they abandoned her on purpose? I thought of Dad's face last night, red with rage, of Linda's smirk, Jake's laugh. They had erased her, just like they tried to erase me. The car idled at a red light. My reflection in the windshield looked pale, older than I remembered. Not tired, just done. "Mommy," Lily called from behind me. "Can we see her again soon?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah, baby, we will." But my thoughts weren't on visiting anymore. They were on that note, on the fact that it had been hidden, that it existed at all. What was Grandma trying to tell me? Who would she want to pay? And why now? And deep down, a darker question scratched at the edges of my mind. One I couldn't shake even as we pulled into the driveway. What else had my family buried? I didn't sleep that night. Even with Lily curled beside me, her tiny hand resting on my arm, I lay staring at the ceiling of our cramped apartment, paint cracked in one corner, a faint water stain blooming like a secret no one wanted to name. The city outside moved on as if nothing had happened. A siren echoed far off. Then silence. Then a dog barked. Then nothing again. But in my mind, everything buzzed. Grandma's note, "They'll pay for this," looped behind my eyes like neon signage. I kept seeing her hand, limp under the quilt, her silence, her disappearance from every family photo on Dad's mantel, as if she never existed. By morning, the coffee was bitter. I forgot the sugar. Lily ate dry cereal from the box, cross-legged on the floor with cartoons humming low on the TV. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers trembling over my laptop's touchpad. The login screen glowed softly in the pre-dawn gray. One click, another. Then I was in. I didn't expect fireworks or alarms when I saw the numbers. But I did expect familiarity, consistency. What I got was chaos. I scrolled, froze, again and again. My personal business account, the one I'd built from the ground up, the foundation of my AI diagnostics company, was nearly empty. Not wiped clean, but bled out. $87 million gone. Not all at once, but in slivers. Hundreds of transactions, jewelry stores, car dealerships, private flights, property taxes on places I'd never seen. I clicked faster, fingers slipping on the trackpad. My heart pounded like a trapped thing. Linda's name showed up first. A custom necklace from a boutique in Aspen, $23,000. Then Jake, Vegas hotel suite, $1,100. A week later, Dubai. And then Richard Carter, my father, luxury SUV dealership, downtown Chicago, paid in full. A low noise escaped me, somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. How? How did they get access? I traced the transfer trail, knuckles whitening as I gripped the edge of the table. They'd routed funds through a secondary account, an old one I'd used back in the early days when I trusted family names on paperwork because I thought that was what daughters did. My name was still on it, but so was Dad's. I felt sick. I built that company while bouncing Lily on my hip, coding through fevers and court hearings, risking everything while they sneered behind my back, acting like I was just playing entrepreneur. And now they were living off it, lavishly, shamelessly, while calling me a disgrace. A ding pulled me out of my spiral. Text from Dad. "Send the cash, Emma. Jake's tuition deadline is today. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stared at the screen, the gall of it. No apology, no explanation, just entitlement. He didn't even ask, just expected. My jaw clenched, my fingers hovered above the reply field, but I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the folder on my desktop labeled Cap Table Pre-Investment. The spreadsheet I hadn't touched in over a year. I scanned the names. Mine in bold, and a blank column beside it, reserved for family trust extensions, a safety net I'd promised to consider when things were stable. They'd taken it anyway. I closed the laptop, got up, poured the coffee down the sink. My hands shook, but not from fear. I was livid, not just because they stole from me, but because they thought I wouldn't notice. Or worse, they thought I would notice and just take it. Because that's what daughters do, right? Let it go. Keep the peace. Be grateful they let me into their home. A sudden flash, Christmas night, the moment Dad shoved me toward the door, hit me again. I remembered the look on Linda's face, not surprise, not guilt, Satisfaction? She knew. They all did. And that night wasn't an impulsive explosion. It was a purge. They'd already gotten what they wanted. Now they were erasing the evidence. The room felt colder than before. I wrapped my arms around myself, staring at the condensation crawling down the window pane like frost veins. I thought of Grandma again. Her silence. The note. Was this what she meant? Were they bleeding her dry too? And then, like a knife to the gut, I remembered the nursing home, the cheap sheets, the broken chair, the blank walls, and the unopened Christmas cards. She'd had money. Once. So had I. And now? They were living off stolen wealth while pretending we were the burdens. I picked up my phone, hovered over Dad's contact. I didn't call. Not yet. I wasn't ready for confrontation. But I was ready for war. My empire was built on code, yes, but also instinct. And mine was screaming now. I would find out how they did this. I would find out when. And I would find a way to take it back. As I reached for my notepad, the one with the company's early server passwords scribbled on the back page, a shadow shifted across the hallway, just outside the apartment door. I froze. Lily looked up from the TV. "Mommy?" But there was nothing there. Or maybe there was. Maybe they knew I'd found out. And maybe they weren't done yet. I met Detective Hayes at a quiet corner table in a downtown diner that hadn't been updated since the 80s. Laminated menus, cracked leather booths, and the low hum of fluorescent lights that buzzed like an insect caught in glass. It smelled like old coffee and bacon grease, comfort wrapped in decay. He was already there, flipping through a thick manila folder like it was his second skin. "Emma Carter," he said, glancing up. "Took you long enough." I was deciding whether I actually wanted to open this door, I replied, sliding into the booth across from him. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, now that you're in, I suggest you buckle up." I didn't speak, just nodded once. He handed me the folder. Inside were printed bank statements, dozens of them, some going back years, transactions, signatures, transfers, all lined up in neat little rows like soldiers preparing for war. At first, it was just familiar pain, the same names, same trail of greed, but then I saw it, my signature, over and over, dozens of times. On transfers I never approved, on accounts I hadn't touched in years. The handwriting was mine, almost, a little off, a little too clean. "Forgery," Hayes said, reading my face. "Whoever did this studied you close, had time, practice, confidence." My stomach churned. "My dad," I whispered. Hayes nodded. "That's what I thought too." I stared at the pages. My name, my identity, used like a crowbar to pry open everything I'd built. He flipped to another page. "Here's the kicker," he said. "One of the accounts he pulled from wasn't even in your business registry." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He slid the paper toward me. "This one was created under your name, but using an old tax ID from a consulting shell you shut down 3 years ago." I felt like I was floating above my own body. "I shut that down before Lily was even in preschool," I muttered. "Yeah, well," Hayes said, "someone reopened it 6 months ago." My hands curled into fists on the table. "Was he working alone?" I asked. Hayes hesitated. That pause said more than words. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Look, I can't prove Linda and Jake signed anything, but they're beneficiaries. They knew, or at least suspected." Of course they did. That Christmas smirk from Linda, Jake's fake laugh. It wasn't just petty resentment, it was confidence. They already had their hands in the vault. I sat back. The diner lights suddenly felt too bright, too sharp. Hayes pushed a photo across the table. "You'll want to see this." It was grainy, black and white, but the man was unmistakable. My father, standing outside some kind of building, metal awning, graffiti on the walls, shaking hands with someone whose face was mostly obscured by a hood. "Who's that?" I asked. "We don't know yet," he said, "but we're working on it. My gut says he's not from the corporate world." Something cold tightened in my chest. "What was Dad doing with a guy like that?" Hayes didn't answer. He didn't have to. This went beyond embezzlement, beyond family betrayal. There was a bigger game here, and I'd only been seeing the edge of it. I stood up too fast, the folder clutched against my chest. "Keep me posted," I said. "Emma." He waited until I looked at him. Don't confront him yet. He's not cornered, and cornered men do stupid things. I nodded once, throat too dry to speak. Outside, the sky had turned steel gray. Wind bit at my cheeks as I stepped onto the cracked sidewalk, the folder pressing into my ribs like it could hold me together. I needed air, space, answers. My mind reeled. He forged my name. He stole my company. And now he was meeting men in alleyways? What was he into? What was I pulled into? That night, after Lily had gone to sleep, I sat in the dark with the folder open on my lap and the photo of my father lying on the floor beside me. I thought about when I was 10, the night he taught me how to sign my name in cursive. I'd messed up every time, frustrated and teary-eyed. He'd placed his hand over mine, guiding the pen slowly across the paper. "Your name matters," he'd said. "It's who you are. Protect it." I closed my eyes, jaw trembling. He didn't just steal from me. He weaponized the one thing he told me to protect. The room felt like it was tilting, like the ground beneath me was folding in on itself. I picked up the photo again. The man beside Dad, his posture, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand lingered too long in the handshake. It wasn't business. It was leverage. Who was he? And what the hell did he have on my father? Dad used to say our family didn't keep secrets. We kept standards. I remember being 9 years old, sitting on the living room floor, tears in my eyes after I got caught sneaking a second piece of pie before dinner. He didn't yell. He didn't raise a hand, just leaned down and whispered, "We're Carters. We don't hide. We correct." But now I knew the truth. Correction was just his word for cover-up. The study in Dad's house always smelled like varnish and old ambition. I hadn't been back there since I was 17, the day he accused me of lying about a scholarship that didn't pan out. I still remembered the weight of his glare, the way he gripped the doorframe like he was holding back a flood of disappointment. Back then, I'd shrunk. Now I moved through that same doorway with my head high and my hands steady. I had waited until they were all out. Linda's car was gone. Jake's social feed said he was networking at a whiskey tasting downtown, and Dad had a standing Thursday night meeting at the country club. I knew the drill. He'd be out for hours playing king among smaller men. The study lights were dim. Afternoon sun filtered through the heavy curtains in pale gold strips, cutting across the dust, dancing in the air. The wood-paneled walls had once seemed impressive. Now they looked like props in a cheap stage play. I went straight to the desk, same brass handles, same top drawer that squeaked just a little when you opened it too fast. Most of it was useless. Outdated receipts, blank envelopes, business cards from realtors and insurance agents. But the bottom drawer was locked. I knelt, running my fingers along the edge. It clicked loose with just the right angle and pressure. Same trick I'd used years ago to sneak candy from the safe drawer. Inside, beneath a stack of property ledgers, was a plain white envelope. No name, no return address. I unfolded it slowly. The paper was yellowed, brittle around the edges, the ink slightly faded. The truth will break them. No salutation, no context, no signature. I read it again and again. My hands went cold. This wasn't just guilt. It was a warning. I turned it over. Nothing. But then I noticed the fold lines didn't match the size of the envelope. This letter had been tucked into something else before. Had Grandma sent this? Was she the one trying to protect me? Or was this meant for someone else? My heart pounded as I tucked the letter into my coat pocket, replacing everything else exactly how I found it. But as I backed away, I caught sight of a framed photo on the wall, one I hadn't noticed in years. Dad, younger, sitting beside Grandma Ellen on the front porch of her old farmhouse. Her eyes were brighter then, but his looked the same, calculated, posed. And suddenly, I remembered something. One summer, years ago, Grandma had slipped me an envelope under the dinner table. She'd whispered, "Don't let your father see it." But I'd forgotten. I was 16, distracted. The letter had disappeared after that night. Was this the same one? I left the study and closed the door softly behind me, the letter burning in my coat pocket like a secret too loud to keep. The night air was cold as I stepped outside, the sky already folding into indigo. I paused at the end of the driveway, staring back at the house. So many lies had lived in those walls. and I had walked among them like a ghost. When I got home, Lily was asleep on the couch, still in her hoodie, a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich on a paper plate beside her. I kissed her forehead and tucked a blanket around her. Her breathing steadied something in me, but the fire was still there. I poured myself a glass of water, hand trembling slightly as I set it down. Then I opened my laptop and scanned through Grandma's nursing home records again, every payment, every note, every signature, and that's when I saw it. A wire transfer, $42,000, labeled Long-Term Private Care Trust, from an account that no longer existed. I checked the date. It was 5 months ago. Grandma didn't have that kind of money. She'd told me that herself the last time we talked clearly. Her savings had been emptied, everything handled by Richard. Except this came from somewhere else, another buried piece of something she'd tried to leave behind. My chest tightened. Had she hidden money from him, or had he hidden money for something else? I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. What else had they taken from her? What else were they hiding? The truth wasn't just ugly, it was deliberate, layered, and old. And maybe it wasn't just about greed anymore. Maybe it was about survival. The laptop screen glowed in the dim light of my apartment, casting a cold blue hue across the room. Lily was asleep in her bedroom, her nightlight humming softly behind the door. I stared at the blinking cursor in my email draft for what felt like hours before closing it all together. Emails wouldn't work for this. They'd twist my words, laugh in private group chats, gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting. No, I needed to see their faces. I opened Zoom, click, new meeting, copy invite link. My hand hovered for a moment before sending it to Dad, Linda, and Jake in a single group text. Let's talk. 1 hour, no excuses. I didn't wait for replies. The hour dragged like wet wool across skin. I sat at my desk, the only light coming from the glow of the laptop and the flicker of headlights passing outside. I watched the timer tick down on the waiting room screen, every second a reminder of how long I'd stayed silent. 8 p.m. sharp. Their names popped in, one after another. Dad appeared first, his background a polished mahogany bookshelf, as if image could cover truth. Linda was next, perched on her white leather sofa like she was posing for a magazine. Jake logged in last, still chewing something, reclined casually like he didn't have a care in the world. "Wow," Jake said. "This must be important. You called a family meeting." Linda tilted her head. "Emma, honey, we're very busy tonight. What's this about?" I didn't respond. I just reached down, pulled the manila folder into view, and held up the forged documents, Dad's handiwork in my name. "You owe me everything," I said, my voice even, each word slow and sharpened to cut. Dad scoffed. "Excuse me? You heard me. I built that company. And you used my name, my signature, to drain it." Linda blinked, lips parting just slightly. Jake's chewing stopped. "You're delusional," Dad said, laughter forced and hollow. "This is some fantasy you've cooked up because you got embarrassed at Christmas." I leaned closer to the screen. "Then explain this." I held up the transfer logs, names, dates, account numbers. Jake cursed under his breath. Linda's mouth twitched. "This is a misunderstanding." "No, it's fraud. You don't have proof we touched any of that," Dad said quickly. Too quickly. "You forged my name, Dad," I snapped. "Over and over." He didn't deny it. Just narrowed his eyes, jaw tightening like he was calculating how far this could go. Jake leaned forward. "You think dragging us into court will fix this? You'll destroy this family." I stared at him. "You did that already." Linda's voice sharpened. "You need to calm down before you make a mistake." That was rich, her talking about mistakes. "You left Grandma in that place," I said, my hands trembling beneath the desk. "You let her rot while you played house with my money." "She didn't want to live with us," Linda said too quickly. "She was happier there." "She couldn't afford anything, and you knew it, so don't pretend she had a choice." For a second, I thought I saw something flicker behind Linda's eyes. Guilt? Maybe. But it was gone too fast to catch. "You don't know what we've sacrificed," Dad said, his voice rising now. "Do you think your business succeeded by itself? I gave you connections, I made calls, You took everything," I cut in. "You robbed me and then tried to erase me." The silence that followed was thick and ugly. Jake finally spoke, tone low. "You think you're better than us now, huh? You with your money and your martyr complex." "No," I said. "I just finally see you for who you are." I clicked End Meeting. Their frozen faces disappeared from the screen like dust swept off glass. The apartment was quiet again, save for the low hum of the refrigerator. I stood there, hands gripping the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. They weren't just guilty, they were shameless. And they weren't going to stop. My phone buzzed, a new message. "Dad, don't make us enemies, Emma. You won't win." I stared at the text until the letters blurred. Then I opened a blank legal folder. It was time to fight fire with law. The first time I met Ms. Harper, she didn't offer me a seat. She pointed to the chair across from her desk, eyes sharp behind dark-rimmed glasses, and said, "I only take on cases with bite. You have 15 minutes. Her office was a war zone of paperwork, case files stacked in chaotic towers, court dockets pinned to the wall like trophies, and a whiteboard filled with scribbled names and arrows that looked more like a crime syndicate map than legal strategy. I didn't flinch. I dropped the folder of evidence between us and opened to the page with Dad's signature. "The ink's fresh," I said, "and it's not mine." Her eyes didn't move from mine for a full 3 seconds. Then she pulled the folder closer, skimmed the first few pages, and let out a quiet, amused breath. "Well then," she said, "let's ruin someone's day." I liked her instantly. Over the next week, we worked like soldiers preparing for battle. Harper was ruthless, methodical, and brilliant. She didn't sugarcoat things, she sliced through them. She called Dad a gilded con man, Linda a smirking opportunist, and Jake, well, she didn't bother naming him. "He's background noise," she said, "useful only if he panics." She'd already filed the injunction paperwork before our second meeting ended. "We freeze the accounts first," she said. "Hit them where they breathe, then we show our hand." I nodded, heart pounding as I signed the order. The pen left a heavy line beneath my name, my real signature. No one else's hand this time. But just as we were wrapping up, Harper's tone changed. "There's something else," she said, flipping open another file. It was thin, only a few pages. But what she showed me shifted the ground under my feet. "He's in debt," she said. "Dad?" She nodded. "Bad debt. Off the books kind. From a man with a record that spans 3 states. Loan shark. Goes by Red. Real name unknown." I blinked. "Why would Dad even—" She slid a photo across the desk. Same grainy one Hayes had shown me. Dad shaking hands with that hooded man. Only now I had a name to the face. "He's being squeezed," she said. "Hard. If your dad's forging signatures and liquidating assets, it's not just for luxury, it's survival." The idea unsettled me, not because I felt bad for him, but because people make reckless choices when they're desperate, and desperate men have nothing to lose. Back in my apartment that night, I sat with Lily asleep in the next room, and Harper's words echoing through my head. Was this whole betrayal not just about greed, but fear? Was that what drove him to forge my name, drain Grandma's trust, steal from me? The thought didn't excuse anything. But it did change the battlefield. Because I wasn't just dealing with thieves anymore. I was standing in the crossfire of something much darker. I stared at my laptop screen. The freeze order was approved. I clicked the final submission button. Just like that, every Carter family account tied to my name, my company, or my past was locked down. No more withdrawals, no more cover-ups. They'd wake up tomorrow to 0 access, and I'd be there to watch it happen. The next morning, Harper called early. "They're scrambling," she said with a grin. 3 declined card transactions before 9 a.m. Jake tried to buy gas. Linda's Amazon cart didn't go through. And your dad? He called his banker 4 times in 10 minutes. I didn't smile. It wasn't joy I felt. It was justice. They didn't know yet what was coming next. The lawsuit, the investigation, the subpoenas. But they would soon. Still, something nagged at me, a piece of the puzzle that hadn't locked into place. Red. Who was he, really? And why did Dad turn to him? That night I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window, city lights bleeding into the living room like quiet stars. The letter from Grandma still lived in my coat pocket. The truth will break them. Maybe she meant more than just emotional collapse. Maybe there was still a truth even I hadn't uncovered, and that terrified me, because if Red had leverage over Dad, what if I was part of the price? The beeping of the heart monitor was the first thing I heard when I stepped into her room. Steady, mechanical, distant, like the rhythm of a clock running out of time. The nurse gave me a tight smile and slipped past me with a clipboard tucked to her chest. She didn't say anything, just nodded like she knew there wasn't much left to explain. Grandma Ellen lay there, bones wrapped in skin that looked thinner than rice paper. Her eyes fluttered behind closed lids, and her mouth parted slightly with every shallow breath. The room was too bright, sterile, and cold. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, humming like flies in a jar. I walked to her bedside and reached for her hand. It felt small in mine, fragile, like holding the past in a single grip. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered. Nothing, not even a flinch. I sat in the plastic chair beside her, pulled the blanket gently up over her chest, and let my gaze wander the room. There were no flowers, no cards, no framed photos, just the quiet and the guilt. I thought back to the Christmas cards, unopened, stacked like forgotten mail in a mailbox no one checked anymore. The empty visits, the silence. We'd all failed her, but none more than the ones who pretended to care. My fingers traced slow circles on her knuckles. Her skin was cool but soft, familiar, like the afternoons when she'd braid my hair and hum that old tune, always off-key but somehow perfect. "You didn't deserve this," I murmured. "None of it." Still, she didn't move. I sat with her for a while, long enough for the clock to tick past lunch and the hallway noise to quiet. The world outside this room faded until it was just the hum of the monitor and the faint whistle of the heater through the vents. Then, as I leaned closer, her lips parted. "Thomas," she breathed. It was faint, barely more than a ghost of a name. But I heard it. My breath caught. I squeezed her hand. "Grandma, who's Thomas?" Her eyelids fluttered, but her gaze stayed closed. No answer, just that one word, now hanging in the air like a riddle. Thomas. I sat frozen, heart pounding, trying to place the name. It wasn't family, not one I'd heard in stories or arguments or holiday seating charts. A nurse peeked in again. "Everything okay?" "She said something," I replied. "A name." The nurse gave me a sad look. Sometimes memories surface near the end. Names, regrets, unfinished things. It's the mind trying to make peace. I nodded, but peace wasn't what I felt. It was dread. After the nurse left, I leaned in close again. "Who is he, Grandma? Did Dad do something to him?" She didn't speak, didn't even blink, but tears had formed in the corners of her eyes. She was still in there, somewhere, trying to speak through a body that wouldn't cooperate anymore. I stayed another hour, whispering stories, apologies, names, mine, Lily's, the dog we used to have when I was 5. But she stayed quiet. When I finally stood, it felt like leaving a sacred place. I kissed her forehead, smoothing a wisp of white hair from her temple. "I'll find out," I promised. "Whatever it is, I'll find it." On the drive home, the city lights blurred past my windshield, smeared by drizzle and exhaustion. My phone buzzed 3 times in a row. Dad, then Jake, then an unknown number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer any of them. I pulled into the garage, sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, and stared at the note in my pocket. "They'll pay for this." Maybe Thomas was part of it. Maybe he was the key to the rot that ran deeper than even I knew. And maybe Grandma hadn't been the only one they'd betrayed. The rain had turned to sleet by the time I pulled over. I sat in my car outside the old municipal building, wipers squeaking across the windshield, eyes locked on the message Hayes had sent 5 minutes earlier. "Got something. You'll want to see it in person." I stared at the blurred windows, fingers wrapped tight around the steering wheel. My coat clung damp to my shoulders, but I didn't move. My heart pounded low in my chest like a drumbeat I couldn't turn off. Something about the name, Thomas, still haunted me. I hadn't told Hayes yet, not about Grandma whispering it, not about the tear in her eye. Somehow I knew it was connected. When I finally stepped out, the cold hit me like a slap. Wind slicing through the air, slush pooling at the curb. The city felt sharper than usual, like it too was bracing for something. Hayes met me at the side entrance, a file clutched in his gloved hand. He looked tired, tense, less like a man solving a case, more like someone carrying one. "We ran the numbers," he said without greeting. "Everything you flagged." "And?" He handed me the folder. The first page was a withdrawal record. $2 million pulled in 3 transfers over 9 months. All from an account I'd never seen before, but the name on it wasn't Dad's. It was Grandma's. My throat tightened. "I don't understand. She didn't have anything left. Her records showed." "Because this wasn't listed in her estate," he cut in, "or her nursing care files. It was offshore and hidden well." I scanned the account dates. Last accessed 10 months ago. Final deposit labeled loan guarantee. My knees went weak. "She bailed him out," I whispered. "Didn't she?" Hayes didn't answer right away. Just turned the next page. A name I hadn't seen before appeared in bold. Thomas Redmond. I blinked. Read. The loan shark. "That's him," Hayes said. "Alias. Goes by Red. Your dad took money from him. Big money. But when things went sideways, it was Grandma who stepped in, paid off most of it." My breath fogged the air. "She knew," I murmured. "She knew what he was doing, and she still protected him." "She likely thought she was protecting you too," Hayes said, "keeping the family intact. Quiet." I felt something shatter inside me. All those years of silence, the withering body, the forgotten holidays. She wasn't abandoned. She chose to carry the weight alone, and now she was dying with secrets buried beside her. I flipped through the rest of the file, transaction logs, a partial contract, scanned pages of letters, handwritten notes, some with my dad's signature, others barely legible. But one name kept circling back: Thomas. On the last page was a threat, scrawled across a utility bill in red ink: "Balance due or the daughter pays." The words hit like ice. They weren't vague. They weren't metaphor. They meant me. I looked at Hayes. "Did Dad?" "We don't know if he acted on it," he said quietly. "But it's clear Red had leverage, and your dad was running out of time." My mind spun. Everything I thought I'd known about this betrayal, about where it started, how deep it went, it was worse. It wasn't just greed or ego. It was survival, and it had nearly cost me everything. I left with the folder under my arm, boots crunching against frozen gravel as I crossed back to the car. Inside, I sat in silence, the heat blasting against the fogged glass. I thought of Grandma again, her thin voice, that name. Had she whispered it out of guilt or warning? And then a deeper fear crept in, one I hadn't let surface until now. If she saved Dad with that money, who was Red coming for next? I picked up my phone and dialed Harper. "We need a protective order," I said. "What happened?" "I think someone's still watching us." The courtroom felt colder than it should have. High ceilings, marble floors, the stale scent of old paper and stronger perfume. Every footstep echoed like a challenge. I stood behind the plaintiff's table, fingers clenched around the edge, trying to anchor myself. Across from me, Dad, Linda, and Jake. Linda wore black like it was a funeral. Jake had a smug expression pasted across his face, chewing gum like a bored teenager. And Dad looked thinner, paler, but not defeated. No. There was a flicker in his eyes, something unreadable, like he was still playing a game I hadn't figured out the rules to. Harper stood beside me, crisp blazer, heels grounded like steel. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. She just adjusted her glasses and said, "Let's gut them clean." The judge entered. Everyone rose. My legs trembled, but I didn't show it. I couldn't afford to. What followed felt like peeling skin. Harper presented everything, every forgery, every siphoned cent, every lie wrapped in Dad's carefully maintained public persona. The paper trail, the shell companies, the manipulated accounts. It was all laid bare. Jake looked stunned when his name appeared on a wire transfer to a private casino in Monaco. Linda blinked hard when Harper read out the designer jewelry list, each one paid from my trust fund. And Dad? He sat motionless, until the signatures. Harper flipped through the exhibit binder, showing each forged document, each mimic of my name, the same slant, the same loops. Then she turned to me. "Ms. Carter," she said, "can you confirm these signatures are not yours?" I stood, voice caught somewhere between my gut and throat. "They look like mine," I said slowly, "but they're not. He forged them." I pointed at my father, and for the first time he looked directly at me. He didn't deny it, didn't defend it. He just stared, cold, calculating, like he was seeing me for the first time. The judge asked if he wished to respond. Dad stood, cleared his throat, and then, without emotion, said, "I did what I had to do." No apology, no regret. Just that. Like betrayal was a necessity. Like I was the obstacle, not the victim. The ruling didn't take long. Full freeze on all family accounts, legal seizure of assets, return of stolen funds where possible. When the gavel hit the bench, it echoed like thunder in my chest. Harper squeezed my arm once. "It's done," she whispered. But it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. Outside the courthouse, press swarmed like gnats. Flashes burst in my face. Voices shouting questions I couldn't hear. I kept walking. Linda screamed something behind me. Jake kicked the sidewalk. Dad didn't follow. I turned the corner and let myself breathe. And just as I was about to pull out my phone to call Lily, a thought hit me like a slap. Why didn't he fight harder? Why didn't he deny it? Why did he look relieved? Back home, I pulled the file Hayes had given me from the drawer, scanned through the offshore records again. Red's threats, the debt Grandma had covered. But one detail stood out now, glowing like a warning. One account hadn't been touched, the largest, $3.2 million, still active, still hidden, still in Grandma's name. Why? Why leave that one untouched? Unless it was meant for something else, or someone. I picked up the letter again. Her words burned into the yellowed paper. "The truth will break them." I leaned back in my chair. Maybe the courtroom wasn't the finish line. Maybe it was just the opening shot. The ocean outside my window didn't crash. It breathed. Gentle waves rolled across the white sand, retreating in slow rhythms like lungs exhaling. My new house in Hawaii sat perched above the beach, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling glass, dappling the hardwood in gold. Peace. I built this space for it. But my heart hadn't caught up yet. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, a warm mug of tea in my hands, watching Lily run barefoot across the yard, chasing seafoam and shouting at clouds. Her laugh, sharp and real, cracked open something in me I didn't know I'd sealed shut. I'd won. The courtroom, the freeze, the fallout. They couldn't touch me now. And yet, peace still felt like a borrowed coat, something I hadn't quite earned. The untouched account still haunted me. $3.2 million, there's Grandma's name. Never moved, never touched. Why? That question stalked me through every room in this house. I was days away from launching the Ellen Foundation. My first act since the ruling. It would be funded entirely from my regained empire, plus the remainder of that secret account. I'd already met with city officials in Chicago, outlined a program for elder care, drafted an initiative for financial protection training for aging citizens. I was doing what Grandma had been denied, giving protection before pain could bloom. Still, something in me remained restless. That night, I lit a single candle in the living room, sat cross-legged on the floor with Grandma's note in one hand, my fingers tracing the faded edges again. The truth will break them. I had shattered them already. In court, in headlines, but this felt unfinished. The doorbell rang. The sound echoed strangely in the quiet house. I opened the door cautiously, half expecting another courier with legal documents or donation forms, but it was just an envelope, no return address, no markings. I picked it up slowly. Inside, another letter, thicker paper this time, handwritten. The first line stopped my breath. "I saw what you did. And I want in." It wasn't signed by Dad, or Jake, or Linda. At the bottom, in tight script, R. Red. He knew where I lived, and he wasn't finished. I called Harper immediately, voice tight. "He sent a letter." Her voice sharpened. "What does it say?" I read it aloud. "He wants in?" "On the foundation," I said. "He's threatening a public scandal if I don't." A pause, then. "You don't negotiate with extortionists, Emma." "I know," I said quietly, "but he knows something I don't." Another pause. Then she asked, "What are you thinking?" I looked at Lily through the window again. her hands full of seashells, her smile a world away from all this rot. I think I need to meet him. Absolutely not. But I'd already ended the call. This wasn't about legality anymore. It was about ending the story Grandma never got to finish. I met him on neutral ground, a quiet cafe off the main road tucked between a surf shop and a bookstore that still smelled like sun-warmed ink. The breeze carried salt and jasmine, no security, no Harper. Just me and the man who once threatened my life with a red pen on a utility bill. Red sat by the window, his eyes hidden behind thick sunglasses, a half-empty coffee cup in front of him. No entourage, no theatrics. I walked in, ordered tea I wouldn't drink, and sat across from him. "You found me," I said. He smiled, thin and practiced. "Didn't have to? You broadcast your legacy like a lighthouse." I didn't flinch. "Why the letter?" "Because I knew you'd come," he said. "You're like her." My breath caught. "Who?" "Ellen," he said. "Your grandmother." He slid a photo across the table, black and white, faded edges. Grandma, years ago, maybe mid-30s, standing beside a man who looked exactly like Red. "You were..." "Her brother," he said. "Estranged, until she needed help. And later I did." I blinked hard. "You're Thomas." He nodded once. "Why hide?" "She wanted it that way. Said the Carters would burn everything if they knew where the money came from." My thoughts reeled. All this time, I thought he was just a shadow at the edge of the story. But he was blood. Family. Not the monster, but the final mirror. "So why contact me now?" "Because I saw what you did," he said. "You didn't just tear them down. You built something out of it. Ellen would have wanted that." I studied him carefully. "Then why the threat?" He sighed. "Old habits. I thought you'd buy me out. Instead, you're doing what we never could." We sat in silence as the waves crashed just beyond the glass. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. A legal release. Complete forfeiture of the remaining account. Signed. "I'm done," he said. "The rest belongs to you, to her." I didn't reach for it, not right away. "You could have told me the truth a long time ago." "I wasn't sure you were strong enough to hear it," he said. "Turns out, you're stronger than all of us." When I finally took the document, my fingers barely brushed his. No handshake, no promise, just quiet closure. That night, I sat by the shore while Lily collected shells, her laughter skipping like stones across the tide. I opened the final transfer log. The $3.2 million was now under the Ellen Foundation's name, and with it, I launched a housing program for displaced seniors, a legal clinic for financial abuse victims, a scholarship fund for young women in tech, especially single moms. The boardroom where I once pitched AI diagnostics was now where I taught first-gen college students how to protect their patents. I still get texts from Jake, empty apologies, guilt disguised as humor. Linda went quiet, maybe out of shame, maybe strategy. Dad never contacted me again. His silence was the last honest thing he gave me. Sometimes I wonder what Grandma would say, seeing all this, seeing Lily thrive, seeing me not just survive, but take root. Maybe she'd hum that off-key tune while stirring her tea. Maybe she'd say nothing, just nod like she always did, when words weren't enough. Here's what I've learned. Power isn't just reclaiming what was stolen, it's deciding what not to pass down. Pain doesn't have to be inherited. Betrayal doesn't have to become legacy. I didn't just end a cycle, I rewrote the story. And if you've ever been told you were too soft, too strange, too small, remember this. Quiet is not weakness. Sometimes it's preparation. If this story hit home or reminded you of your own, go ahead and tap like. Subscribe for more. Comment your story. Share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone. And stick around. There's another story waiting for you in the next video.